Welcome to the Grampians Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Neil Butler. In each episode of the podcast, we speak to a representative of the Grampian winemakers or one of the wineries in the region. We'll learn about the wines, the wineries, and of course, the personalities associated with one of Victoria's leading wine regions. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Damien Sheehan from Mount Langi, who's going to talk to us about the Grampians Wine Region. Welcome, Damien.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, this podcast series is all about the Grampians Wine Region. So first things first, where do we find the region?
All right. It's in Western Victoria, the Grampians Wine Region. Best way to get there from Melbourne is to travel on the Western Highway. It's about 2 hours. You'll find the border as you travel from Ballarat to Ararat. You'll cross the border just after the town of Beaufort. So it's quite a large region, I guess, if you look at the borders of it. But you enter it at Mount Langi, for example, was probably one of the first vineyards you would come across with the cellar door. And then you've got options. You can go north towards Mountainside. That's our closest cellar door as a neighbour. Or you keep heading into the centre of the region along the Western Highway, and you'll end up at Great Western, which is kind of like the heart of the region.
So from top to bottom, left and right, there you go, some good geographic terminology. How big does the area cover, roughly, from sort of north to south, east to west?
Yeah, so it's, like I said, it's reasonably large when you think about it in those terms, because it goes... It joins the Pyrenees wine growing region. So you'll see that we cover some little towns to the north of here, Warrack, or Buangor, I mentioned before. Then you've got Warrack north of that. And then you probably head in towards Ararat, and there's a collection of little villages along there that are part of our wine history, our viticulture. Places like Armstrong, you've got Gully, and then of course on to Ararat, and then Stawell sort of covers the northern part of where we see vineyards. But then you keep travelling west and you go as far as Horsham. There's a handful of wineries out that way as well, and so we're encircling the Grampians National Park at this point. So then you would head south and you'd find yourself at the western and southern end of the Grampians National Park, and then you're capturing town of Dunkeld, which is home of the Royal Mail Hotel. That's pretty well known, and down in that neck of the woods, Grampians Estate have a vineyard, and that's their first vineyard was planted there, and they've also got a well-known cellar door in the Great Western region as well. But then you pick up some beautiful little towns if you keep coming back towards the Ararat township, if you like. Having been through Dunkeld, you'll make your way through Halls Gap. You can visit Halls Gap Estate just out of Halls Gap. There's also Pomonal Estate, and Pomonal, of course, is a beautiful little village with a lot going on, and Pomonal Estate's a great attraction. There's also the town of Moyston, and Simon Clayfield, quite a well-known winemaker, has his own brand, Clayfield Wines, in Moyston. And that sort of brings it back full circle, but that'd take a long time to do in one day.
I foolishly, in 1989 or thereabouts, cycled through that region, and I got to tell you, you do it once, it's a long way. There's a lot of roads and there's a lot of hills. I can tell you that for nothing. And so, roughly, how many wineries are covered by that region?
Look, there's about probably around 20 wineries. There's some pretty well-known names there that a lot of viewers would recognise. Best's and Seppelt's wineries have been there since the 1860s. Pretty amazing history, and Best in particular with continuous winemaking since that time. It's one of the oldest wineries in Australia by a long shot. Mount Langi, Turan, we're part of this region as well. But there's a lot of little wineries that people may not have heard of, and they're undiscovered little gems sprinkled around the place as well. And they make up about 20. There's always new ones popping up at the moment too, which is great to see for us. We love welcoming new entrants into the game here for sure.
Well, one of the things I've found, I've spoken obviously to a number of winery owners and general managers and all sorts of people across the wine industry, across the Grampians in this series, and it seems to be a real community. That's the thing that keeps coming out to me, that people are prepared to help each other. They're prepared to say, hey, you like our cellar door? There's one 7 kilometres up the road, turn left. And it seems to be a really warm community of winemakers and organisations.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I've had a lot of experience with different associations, and obviously there's some very large regions in Victoria that are well coordinated, I suppose, and we're small compared to those really big guys. But I really do think we're one of the most successful because we're so tight knit. We know how to get along. We've been at it for such a long time. I don't think we're not trying to set out to prove anything to each other. We realise we're stronger united than we are competing out and out against each other. So it's good to have that spirit of competition. But at the end of the day, we know we do a lot of good when we work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the styles that you get from a large winery and something quite intimate vary as well as the geography. So you're not just getting the same thing no matter where you turn.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That you need. Wine industry attracts a lot of characters, and we've certainly got that here. And those characters, they make wine that speaks to the vineyard that they operate, but it also speaks to themselves, and it's an expression of themselves. And so you're going to get these wines that are full of character, and we've got that in spades around here. There's some, Adam Richardson, Andrew Toomey, those guys are in smack bang in the middle of the region. Only just opened up cellar doors recently, but they've been in the industry longer than me, I'd say. So, they know what they're doing, and they've just developed over time and released their own wines, and they're stellar wines and worth discovering.
Yeah, and I think the other good thing is too that you're not miles and miles apart, so it's quite accessible for someone, particularly if there's a designated driver involved, to be able to cover several in a day. That's obviously part of the appeal as well.
Yeah, that's it. And there's and the lovely little villages that we've got as well. So it's a terrific part of the world to visit. You really feel you're in not outback Australia, but you're in the hinterlands of Australia when you come here. But the scenery is just majestic. You've got the wonderful little villages, and then the wineries dotted in between. And so I think for people visiting this region, it's a great experience to come and it's the way we used to do things in the industry. People used to travel long miles just to see one cellar door, and now to have access to so much great wine so close, it's a real plus.
Yeah. So it's given the geography, and particularly for folk in Melbourne and Geelong and Ballarat, it's the sort of thing that you could set out on a Friday night after work, get some accommodation in either a place like Ararat, one of the bigger centres, or one of the little B&Bs, and I know a couple of the wineries have got B&Bs on site. You spend Saturday exploring, you can spend some of Sunday, and you can be home again ready for work on Monday morning. It's that accessible, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's right. It's a perfect weekend escape, and there's a real sort of tranquility about this region, I think too. And you can get in touch with nature, but at the same time you can bring a little pleasure into the game and taste some good wine, have some good food too. But I think, yeah, for people that like experiencing Australian nature, it's such a fantastic region with the mountains and the wildlife, the winding roads. It really sort of brings you up nice and close and personal. And then you've got the wine to go with it. Yeah, it's a great recipe.
It sounds very, very good. Question without notice. I was talking to one of your associates / competitors the other day, and he mentioned that the Grampians has its own GI. Now, that's a geographic indicator. Am I right? What does that mean, and what does it mean for the region?
Yeah, so it's the technical term for region, and
right.
We didn't have these GIs until the late 80s. They came into being in Australia, and we had to do that because we had to start abiding by the rules, the international rules regarding wine, and stipulate where the product came from. And so it coincided with the disappearance in Australia of names like Hermitage and Burgundy on the bottle. So up until then, we were pretty loose and free with the language we put on the wine labels, whereas with the introduction of things like the GI, we needed to be a bit more careful and upfront with where wines came from. And it's been a great thing for consumers because they like to know what they're getting in the bottle. And if it says Grampians, you can be pretty confident you've got great wine coming from the Grampians region in that bottle. I recommend it.
And this is the same indicator thing that all the heartache with champagne and not being able to call sparkling wine champagne anymore. Is that the same situation?
That's right, Neil. And what's even more current is Prosecco. Is a big deal too, because it's a great variety, but it's also, well now anyway, it's believed to be a region. So that's causing some problems for people that grow Prosecco grapes because they might not be allowed to use that word.
Oh, okay. So what we're saying in this series, and here we are quite early in the series, but we're saying that all the people you're about to meet throughout this series, if they say it's got it's a Grampians Shiraz or a Grampians Riesling or a Grampians anything, you know it's coming from this region in Western Victoria. And between you and I reckon we can say it's pretty good stuff, eh?
Hand on heart, of course you can say that. That's right though, Neil. If it says Grampians, it's from the Grampians GI, and that's got specific boundaries, and there's no doubt about where it comes from.
Excellent. Well, in most episodes, we ask our guest a few questions about themselves, but we're not going to do that this time because Damien will be back in the series during episode 18, in fact. So make sure you catch up with Damien again then to find out a bit more about him and his history in the wine industry. But for now, Damien, thanks for joining us on the Grampians Wine Podcast today.
All right, Neil, not a problem. Just don't forget, viewers, to look out for the Grampians Wine website, and you'll be able to find maps and how to get to all those villages and wineries I mentioned. Cheers.
And we'll make sure we'll put that in the comments of the both the podcast and the video version. Thanks, Damien. Well, that's been another episode of the Grampians Wine Podcast featuring Damien Sheehan from Mount Langi, Duran. You can subscribe to the podcast by visiting grampianswinepodcast.com.au. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but it will give you the chance to listen to previous episodes and to be reminded whenever we publish another episode. You can watch video versions of the podcast by subscribing to the Grampians Wine YouTube channel. We'll be back soon with another episode. My name is Neil Butler. I look forward to your company then. Cheers.